Hey there, Kyle here. Okay, I want to walk through what a temporary rate buy down is and what the purpose of the program is. So in 2022, when rates started going up, we originally had rates around the 2s, 3%, and then all of a sudden rates started skyrocketing, and really it was like February 2022, and got as high as 8% at one point over the last couple of years. The temporary rate buy down was brought in to kind of put a buffer in for people that are like, hey, the payment on a $500,000 loan with 8% rate, it's too high. Now we know that rates will come down eventually. We know they're at kind of historic highs in terms of, if we're looking at the last decade plus. Will they get down to 3%? I mean, my opinion is probably not. Could they? I mean, sure, we don't know. The last couple of years have shown we really don't know. That said, this program was brought in to kind of help mitigate that payment until rates come down to where you can refinance. And so the program works in this way. If we're looking at this scenario, this is just an example. And let's say that today the market rate's 6.99%. So let's just say a 30-year fixed rate mortgage is 6.99% today. Now, we know that your principal and interest payment at 6.99 on a $500,000 loan is going to be $3,323. Okay, that's pretty high. I want to get something lower. Well, let's say this property's been on market a little while, or we think there's some negotiating power there. We can potentially get the seller to offer a credit so that we can use this temporary buy down. Now, in this scenario, this buy down costs $11,647. So we would need to get the seller to contribute $11,647 in order to get this 2-year buy down. Now, there's a 3-2-1 buy down, there's a 2-1 buy down, there's a 1-0 buy down. Those numbers, so what that means is, so that in this example, the 2 means that the first year your rate is 2% lower than what the actual rate you're locked in at. So assuming you are in contract, you locked in a rate, it's 6.99 today. Your first year is actually going to be a payment based off of 4.99. Then the 1 means the second year you're going to be 1% below this market rate of 6.99, so you're going to go to 5.99. And then after year 2, and so year 3 through 30, the remainder of the term, it then goes to this 6.99. Now, the purpose of this entire program is the anticipation that you're going to refinance here in the next couple of years. So it's giving you this lower payment to help you with some cash flow, knowing that once rates come down into the 5s, or even if they do come into the 4s, you'll refinance into a 4% or 5% rate, and this program will be done. So I mentioned the seller's got to pay for it. What does that do in terms of payment? Well, if you look here, at 4.99, it's $7,700 less in total payments that year than what you would be paying if you had a 6.99. Then even at 5.99, the second year, it's almost $4,000 still in saving. So the total then, if you add those two up, that's where the $11,647 is coming from. So essentially the sellers, they're prepaying your mortgage interest those first 2 years. And they're doing it by putting this lump sum of money into a reserve account, into your escrow account, just like your property taxes would and your home insurance. So each month, if we just said you close on your loan, your first payment's coming up for $26.81, as we see here. Well, that's $642 less than what the actual payment is of $33.23. So what happens is you're cutting a check for $26.81, but the actual payment still is $33.23 that goes to the servicer, the person's collecting your mortgage payment. So what happens is, out of your escrow account for that first year, every month you're paying $26.81, but $642 is pulled out to make the remaining rest of the payment. So out of the $11,647, $642 is coming out every month for the first year, and then the second year, $329 is coming out each month. So that after 2 years, there's no more money from the buy down in there, because now you're at your normal 6.99, and if you haven't refinanced, you just move on, still fixed rate. You're paying $33.23 for the remaining of the term. If you refinance, and this is where it's really cool in this market is, let's just say that after 1 year you refinance because rates come down. You're like, it's close enough to 5.99. I want to refinance because I don't want to eventually get to that 6.99. Well, we know if we look at this, there's still 39.43 in that account. Well, if you refinance, that money that the seller put in there goes back to you. So that's your money. It's one of the few times that the seller essentially is paying you in a way to buy their house. So that money goes back to you. Now, so that's a 2-year buy down. Now let's just say, well, I want to get a 4.99% rate today, and I just want it fixed for the whole term, so I never have to touch it. Well, today, that cost is roughly, if you wanted to do that, that's about $50,000 on a $500,000 loan. So it's 10 percentage points essentially. So 10% meaning 10% of the loan amount is $50,000. No one's going to do that, especially when you know that rates are going to come down at some point. You wouldn't spend that kind of money when, let's just say, rates organically in 2 years came down to 5%. Well, you could refinance with no cost for the rate, but you spent $50,000 2 years ago to get this lower rate. It doesn't make sense. Even at 5.99, you're spending $20,000 to do so. Well, is it reasonable to think in the next year or even less that rates come down to around 6%? Absolutely. So that is the contrast of, in a high interest rate market, it doesn't really make sense to pay a bunch in what we call discount points to get a below market rate because of these costs, knowing that rates are going to eventually come down. Now, something to keep in mind is, if this is a situation where a house is on market for like 1 day, it's going to be difficult to get the seller to contribute any funds towards your purchase. Mainly because they want to wait and see, are they going to get a full price offer? Are they going to get something overpriced? So usually it takes a little bit of time. Oftentimes it's a couple weeks before really a seller's completely willing to negotiate, or they're planning on dropping price. And that's where we really look at things like this and say, okay, we know that house has been on market a couple weeks. The seller more than likely is being coached by their agent that we need to do a price reduction. Well, we don't want them to do a price reduction. We want them to credit us in order to get this buy down. Because the reality is, if we get $11,647, you can see what it does to your monthly payment, versus if they give us $11,000 off of the purchase price, that's only moving your monthly payment by about $50. So $50 versus $642 the first year and $329 the second year. So a huge difference. So keep that in mind, that this is not necessarily going to work for a house that's brand new on market. It could. I mean, it depends, but it is something to factor in and know that in a high interest rate market like we are in now, this is a great option to help people in a more affordable monthly payment, with the intent that they're going to be eventually able to refinance. So it's hard right now because everyone thinks that rates are high and that they're stuck with a near 7% rate, and that's all that's available. And it's just not the case. We see clients winning with this type of structure all the time. Now, the other side of that is, I'm going to wait until rates come down. Well, the problem with waiting until rates come down is, unfortunately, a lot of people are thinking that way, is right there. They're not as genius as they think they are, because everyone has the same idea. We're all going to enter the market once rates get more reasonable. So what happens is, now you're competing instead against maybe one other offer or two other offers. You might be competing against 6 offers, 7 offers, 8 offers. What does that do? Well, multiple offers is typically going to push the price up. So now in this scenario, let's just say in this example, it's a $625,000 purchase with 20% down, which gets us to the $500,000 loan amount. Well, that $625,000 house now, maybe it's going for $650,000, $675,000. Well, everything you gained in interest rate, you lost in price, because now you're paying more for the house. So you waited really for no reason, versus if you bought that house for $50,000 less now versus what it'd be later when rates come down, maybe it's more, maybe less. Well, if you bought that now and then just refinance, you win in both scenarios. You paid the lowest that house is going to be for a very long time, because we have a massive inventory issue in the Pacific Northwest, And at the same time, you will be able to refinance. You can't refinance the cost you paid on the house. So we know this every year. We get the same conversations that people are shooting themselves in the foot. They're like, I should have just bit the bullet and bought last year. And then people a year before that were saying the same thing, all the way back to the last 6-7 years or so, because the houses are continuing to appreciate. Now, maybe not the level we saw in 2020 and 2021, but they're still appreciating. They're not going backwards, and that's because of lack of inventory. They're going to continue going up. We just don't have enough houses available. So it's going to continue to appreciate. The same house you would buy today is going to cost more down the road, a year from now, months from now. That's just how the market works when it's basic supply and demand. So this is a great option, great programs, and it's something to keep in mind. And I coach all my agents on this to use this strategy on top of getting closing costs paid if possible. When you're submitting an offer on a house, that we know there's some opportunity for negotiation. So